With feeder calf values at historical highs, now is not the time to save or improperly develop a replacement female that in coming years simply isn't going to improve the overall productivity of the herd. With that thought in mind, Session 4 of this year's virtual beef school was focused on properly selecting and developing only those heifers that fit the goals of the herd. If contemplating saving and breeding replacement heifers now or in the future, listen in as we explore the use of genomic testing on your farm to aid in the seed stock selection process and the proper development of those heifers that are selected and retained. Listen in now as Garth Ruff, OSU Extension Beef Field Specialist, introduces John Yost, OSU Extension Educator in Wayne County, and his presentation on implementing genomic testing on your farm. That is followed with Ruff's presentation, Heifer Development, What Have We Learned?
All right, we'll go ahead and get started here this evening, kind of wrap up our winter, spring webinar series. We've covered a variety of things this year, and those recordings are posted on the OSU Extension Beef Team YouTube channel. So if you've missed any of the previous recordings, feel free to log in to YouTube and watch those. Tonight, kind of focusing on genetics and heifer development. A little bit of a change in gears, breeding season coming around. So try to focus on some things that are timely as we think about that. Our first speaker tonight talking about using genomics, John Yost. John's the Extension Ag and Natural Resources Educator in Wayne County. So John, if you want to share your PowerPoint, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Garth. Appreciate the introduction, and I want to thank the Garth and the Beef team for giving me an opportunity to speak tonight. I've been assigned to lead a discussion here on how you can implement genomic testing into your evaluation programs for both, bull purchases as well as what options we see now out there for evaluation of commercial heifers. Before I get started, I do want to give a thanks to Dr. Troy Rowan. He's a beef cattle geneticist and extension specialist for the University of Tennessee. Heard him talk several times, been part of some of his programs, and he does a great job. And I asked him if I could share some of his materials, and he graciously allowed me to do that. So at the end of the presentation, I'll have some links to a couple additional resources that you'll be able to study up a little bit more to fill in some of the gaps that I may have missed and questions you may have had. But I want to start off tonight by asking and then answering, a question. That being, what is the one place that every cow-calf producer should consider using genomics in their program? And for me, it's quite easy to say that that's in sire selection. There are some producers that may take advantage and purchase an older, more mature bull for their herd sire. But for the majority of us out there, we're looking at bringing in that yearling or coming 2-year-old. And while we expect them to be the most advanced genetics available to us, they come with a little bit of unknown. Their initial EPDs that are provided and generated from their breed associations are an average of their two parents. And then those individual values will have relatively low accuracy. They're starting around 0.1. For these bulls, if they're purchased and fortunate enough to wind up in a purebred operation, then as they produce progeny, those progeny will be, their data will be sent back to the breed association and added to his information, and that will increase the accuracy of his EPDs, and in some cases fine tune those a little bit. But if he goes on to a commercial operation, again, he's going to have could have a lot of value for that producer, but that information is not being returned. So there's still, until we start accumulating, or until you start accumulating enough progeny from him, you really don't have much more information than those initial averages that were generated and provided to you kind of on that day of sale. When we look at the importance of bringing these young bulls into our operation, or any bulls, this becomes a decision that winds up being one of the riskiest ones that you make as a producer. If you take a look at the calf crop that's on the ground now or maybe coming soon, the last 3 bull purchases you made will account for about 87.5% of the genetics of that calf crop. If you were fortunate enough that each one of those was a good selection, or if you hit home run on all of those, you've put yourself in a good position. But if you missed on one of those, you could have put yourself in a hole that can take you a while to breed your way back out of. I was in a conversation with one of the former presidents from the Beef Improvement Federation a couple of years ago, and he was under the opinion, and I don't necessarily have data to back this up, but he was under the opinion that it could take you up to 12 years to breed your way out of a bad bull selection decision. So there's a lot of importance, especially for a commercial operation, with, again, these bulls making up almost 90% of your calf crop genetics, to try to make as best a decision as you can. But again, with these young bulls, we have some information to go off of, but there's still an area of unknown there, and there's a room for genomics to help fill in and provide a little bit of risk management in those situations. And it comes back to, I assume that everyone, in your breeding program, your goal is to advance your herd genetics from year to year. But when it comes down to making that choice, to finding that bull that you can afford, or that you can justify making the expense of, at the end of the day, you're trying to identify a few individuals out of a large population of highly related individuals that come from across a range of production environments and management styles. And we at times have struggled sorting through some of that information to identify that those animals with the best potential to pass their genetics onto our herd and make some type of genetic progress overall, or on particular traits within your particular operation. This is about as nerdy as I'm going to be able to get tonight. This is what they call the breeder's equation. This is really the foundation for what most geneticists do. And again, they're striving to find ways to make genetic change. So to quickly walk you through this equation, and the information here again is to help highlight some of those points that you as breeders need to be looking at and understanding how to make genetic changes within your herd. So on the left-hand side of the equation, again, that delta G is the amount of genetic change that you see in a year. And on the other side, those factors that affect that, and I don't know if you can see your mouse or if I can make it give me my laser pointer here. We'll see, hopefully you can see my laser pointer. This R factor, this is the accuracy of selection, or how well does the metrics that you're using to select an animal predictive of the genetics that it can pass on to its offspring. We'll focus on this quite a bit throughout this discussion. We know that there's a strong correlation between the physical appearance of an animal and the traits it can pass on. We know that a bigger bull is more likely to be able to pass on genetics that will contribute to early life weight gain in his calves. But over time, we have learned that we are able to incorporate not only his phenotypic information, but then the information of his progeny and within his pedigree to create and calculate EPDs that over the long term have become a more accurate and more proven predictor of what genetic potential is. But again, accuracy of selection really is important, and it is one of the factors that you can have some influence over to advance your genetic gain. The middle term here, this is represents the variation, the genetic variation within a trait. The more variation we have within the population for a trait, the easier it is for you to make genetic progress. And conversely, if there's little difference, variability in that trait, you can't make much progress. And we have to have some degree of variation to be able to, again, select for it and move the needle on that. The last part in this numerator, again, this I is the intensity of selection. And this is the likelihood of a member of the population moving on and becoming a member of the breeding herd. Traditionally, in a purebred operation, we'll see a little bit higher intensity of selection as more of those females are heavily scrutinized and potentially carried on to be a breeding stock than what we would in a commercial operation. So again, depending on your circumstances, you may be able to slightly affect that number, but you may not when it comes to the variation within a trait. You don't have any influence over that. But then the last point to talk about on here, the denominator of this equation, L, is the generation interval, or the number of years between generations. And being in the denominator like this can have the largest impact on the amount of genetic progress we can make from year to year. And we can look at some of our brothers in other industries within animal agriculture to see how this impacts things. Chickens, they can begin laying eggs in 22 weeks to turn over that next generation. Swine, we can breed a gilt in a little over 6 months, and by the time she's 10, 11 months old, she's farrowing, where you all know that within beef cattle, we're looking at 2 years at a minimum before we can turn that over. But when you start looking at the genetic evaluation, bulls traditionally, it's pushed that generation interval out a little bit farther. So it has caused some lag in our ability to shorten that generation interval and make some of the bigger impacts. And we'll talk about some work here in a little bit that's been done in the dairy industry to see the impacts that's made for them. Everyone's probably familiar with this, phenotype equals genotype plus environment, meaning the growth performance that we see in an individual is related to its genetics and the environment that it's raised in. But when you're trying to select an individual, we want to be able to separate that environment portion out and just look at what genetics, because that's the only thing that that bull can pass on to his offspring. He can't pass on that environment. And environment, again, being a big part of that. If we look at a trait such as weaning weight, we know that it's 25% genetic effect, and then 75, the remaining 75% of that is all due to environmental impacts. What was the mother's milking ability? Was it vaccinated? Was it born in a drought year? All of those play a significant factor in what we see in the visual performance of an individual calf. And then again, since those environmental factors can't be replicated, we have to find a way to sort those out to get down to where we can try to evaluate what that genetic potential of that calf can be. That's where, traditionally contemporary groups fall in line, where then we can identify those individuals that excel within that environment, being a part of that contemporary group, and relate those, assume that superior performance is also something that can be passed on. But then, as I mentioned earlier, we can take all of his information, the production information from within his pedigree, and we have the calculation of these EPDs, which then help us to determine what that heritable portion of his performance actually is. Again, the genetic potential of an individual calf, we begin by assuming that it is he's receiving half of his genetics from his sire and the other half of his genetics from the dam. So his initial EPDs will just simply be a mathematical average that's reported. But in reality, if I can get my screen wouldn't advance, there we go. But in reality, he is receiving a random sample of the genetics from both his sire and dam, and the difference in his performance in relation to that average of what we would expect, that's accounted for by what we call Mendelian sampling. That takes into account the random sampling that happens within creation of the the DNA that will become him. And in some complex traits, that variation that's accounted for through Mendelian sampling can account for 50% of the variation that we see in those traits. And really, at the end of the day, it comes down to some people call it dumb luck. I've put that there on the screen, but it really is random chance of how traits from mother and father are packaged together to create that individual animal. To show this a little bit better and explain a little bit more about the randomness of this, cattle have roughly 30 pairs of chromosomes. And when you think of all of the A's and T's and C's and G's that match up within that strand of DNA, when we calculate the minimum number of ways that all of those pairs can combine, there's at minimum over 1 billion different combinations that can occur. And when we start to factor in some of the anomalies that can occur during the normal biological processes, that number can actually triple, so that there can be over 3 billion possibilities of combinations that can occur to pass those traits on from those parents to the offspring. To spell this out or show this a different way, again, if we look at this pedigree down here at the bottom, if we want to assume that all 3 of these are flush mates, and you see this, this really becomes evident when we look at embryo transfer calves and flush mates, the difference, knowing that they had the same sire and dam, and of course the uterine environment that they were raised in, so that recip will have an effect on them. But when we just look at the genetic component of this, so these 3 calves at the bottom are, if we assume they are all flush mates, and then below them we have 2 sets of bars. The top one there represents the assumption that half of his genetics came from the sire and half came from the dam. But we can see the proportion that goes back to what their paternal and maternal grandsires and granddams contributed to it. So this bull on the left, if we look, the majority of his genetic material came from his maternal grandsire and his paternal granddam. If out of these 4 individuals on the top row, if we assume that these 2 were the rock stars or the really good ones out of this group, then we would assume that we can assume that he received a favorable random sample. But then if we look at the bull in the middle, we can see that the majority of his genetic material came from his paternal grandsire and maternal granddam. And if they were, lesser individuals compared to the other 2, then we would assume that he received an unfavorable sampling. And this is the variability and the chance that contributes to the risk that we do have in purchasing these unproven young sires. Again, we expect them to be the best genetics that can be offered out there, but still through random chance, there's an opportunity for some variability that now genomics and genomic testing help us to begin to account for. So how does this work? In the past, we would have submitted tail hair samples or the blood cards. Those have pretty much gone by the wayside at this point, and most companies are asking for tissue samples to be submitted with ear punches. So you submit your sample to the company of their choice, and they're running a complete genomic assay on that. And this is different than where some of this started. Some of you may remember back to the single trait tests that we had for marbling, and that was when genetics was new, and we had a few traits isolated, but we hadn't completely mapped the genome. And now we have, again, the ability to run a complete assay of an individual's genome where they are looking at 50,000 or 100,000 locations within that DNA strand where we know there are differences between animals. Once they determine what that is, they develop a mathematical or a numerical representation to show how related that individual is to each member of his pedigree. And once that's been established, then we can begin pulling in all of that information from those members of his pedigree, as well as cousins and anything else genetically related, looking at their production, the production of their progeny, and putting all that information together. We're able to better understand his true genetic merit and what traits he is most likely to be able to pass on to their offspring. Again, being more accurate and having more confidence than what we would with those initial parental averages of what his EPDs started out to be. We have some information from the American Angus Association, and what they've termed is this PE term is progeny equivalence, and it's the number of offspring a bull would have to equal the accuracy increase of a genomic test. So, for example, if we look at weaning weight, the genomic test is equivalent to him having 27 progeny. And on the other end, if we look at carcass weight, it's equivalent to him having 4. So, but over the most part, as you look through this list, that genomic testing is in essence providing him with that first calf crop, and depending on which farm he goes to, maybe even 2 calf crops. And that's before he ever has to breed that first cow. And by creating these, again, that's adding to his accuracy, and also potentially adjusting his actual EPD values to again be more reflective of what we expect him to be able to pass on. You may be saying, all of this sounds well and good, but does it actually work? And the answer to that is yes. In the top right over here, again, some information provided by the American Angus Association. This chart shows the change in genetic progress, or shows the genetic progress before and after the introduction of genomic testing. The blue bars being the time period before, and then the orange bars that time period after. And if we look at these performance traits, weaning weight, carcass weight, ribeye area, we can see how post genomic testing availability, how our rate of change in genetic merit increased, or was increasing, has increased at a more rapid rate than what it did before genomic testing came on board. And we can also see a reduction in those areas where we hopefully, or a lot of people may want to see reduction. So we've seen kind of a slowing down in milk. We know that, maternal milk in a lot of the breeds for a long time, those numbers really exploded and may have started to get a little above where we needed them to be. And then, of course, when we think about back fat, we want to be able to maximize marbling, reduce back fat to help with yield grades, and we've seen that reduction. So again, this is showing that by adopting genomic testing, that we've been able to increase that pace of genetic progress that we've been able to make now over the last 4 or 5 years. But if you remember back to that breeder's equation at the very beginning, the biggest impact that we can have is if we can reduce that generation interval. And on the left-hand side, this chart's showing generation interval progress within the dairy industry. The dairy industry has really bought in full bore to genomic testing and evaluating all of their heifers. And traditionally, as we've kind of moved along through the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, during that time period, AI studs, they were breeding cows, taking those heifers and putting them into centralized testing facilities. They were raising those heifers up, breeding them, entering them into production to collect that information that was then fed back in the system to improve the accuracy of those bulls within the bull studs. And we can see that for a long time, that averaged about 7 years for their generation interval. And then when we hit that late 2009, early 2010 period, and genomics became available, we can see how their average generation interval rapidly declined as they were able to successfully identify those younger sires to use them a little more heavily within their breeding programs. And really, within the cattle industry, that's our only way to really shorten that generation interval for us, is to being able to take advantage of using more young sires. So we hopefully do have that best, newest genetic material out there. And if we can take advantage of that earlier on and identify those, that will lower that L value in the denominator of that equation, accelerating the genetic change that we can make within the population. And to kind of close out the bull portion of this, I'm going to spend some time to finish this up on commercial testing of heifers. But again, our goal is to find what the true genetic merit of that individual that we're looking at is. We want to be able to sort off the environmental component and find out, what genes can he pass on, what traits can he pass on to his offspring. Through genomic testing, there's always a chance that or his EPDs more than likely will move some. But it doesn't matter if they go up or if they go down, in your favor or against you. Those genomically enhanced EPDs give us a truer reflection of what his genetic merit is, and that he would be able to pass on to his calves. And it gives you another tool beyond the traditional phenotypic evaluations and those average EPD numbers to give you a little more confidence in the selection that you're trying to make. I want to spend the rest of our time talking about genomic evaluation options for heifers. Genomic testing of commercial heifers has been a rapidly growing area of interest with both academia and producers alike. There's obviously some similarities to the testing that we do for the genomically enhanced EPDs, but there are some differences that you need to be aware of. And with the genomic EPDs, in a way, that's a no-brainer. Most of the time, the breeder is doing that for you, can provide you that information before you make the purchase. This is going to potentially be an investment that you make, and you need to weigh the pluses and minuses and the information that potentially is going to be provided to you, and understand how it may benefit and in what ways it can benefit your operation. So, again, traditionally our heifer selection, as we mentioned earlier, you start out by trying to pick the best bull that you can afford to buy, or you can justify buying, knowing that that bull is going to make up a large portion of your genetics, for potentially the next 5 to 8 years, depending on how long you have him. The second point there that I've kind of intentionally enlarged, we've used common sense, some type of common sense selection metric. And throughout all of this process, that's one component that shouldn't go away. Again, we need to, and we hope that we can work to improve the accuracy of that selection process, but still, those common sense approaches to evaluating cattle are not going to go away, even with genomics in place. And then at the end of the day, there is, especially in the commercial cattle end, there's a little bit of hope for the best. We hope we've bought the right bull for ourselves. We hope that we've used some common sense selection strategy so that we produce heifers that are going to be in the herd a long time, that are going to produce us a calf every year and become a profitable cow. When we think of those phenotypic selection criteria, and again, I'm going to stress throughout the rest of this that this is something that needs to stay around. There's practical considerations that are going to continue to apply in our decision-making process. Age is always a good one to talk about. That we know that those older heifers are going to start cycling earlier. That means we're going to get to breed them earlier. They're going to calve earlier in the calving season, and then they're going to have a longer rest period before we're going to try to breed her back and her hopefully conceive that second calf to continue on in the herd. We have obviously other options that we can incorporate in here with pelvic score evaluations. We can bring in dam production history depending on the records that you keep, that individual's growth performance. Again, those are still important factors. Weaning weight can also have a similar impact to what age has, in that those heavier heifers, again, are more likely to start cycling, get bred, have a calf early, and breed again. We don't want to discount the factor of, if she has the look. No one wants ugly heifers and ugly cows running around out in their field. So we still want to look to have something that has some appealing phenotype to them. And usually the bottom right-hand corner, and it's the same on this slide, she needs to be confirmed pregnant, because, if we're not getting her pregnant, then she's not doing the work that we've asked her to do. And that's kind of, after we've made some of those other decisions, that's kind of the final straw of whether or not she'll stay around in the herd. Do need to take a minute to try to manage some expectations. And again, what can genomics do for you, and what won't they do? Genomics will estimate the genetic merit of an individual. They will increase the accuracy of those unproven animals. And in the case of commercial heifers, they can establish what those initial EPDs are. And regardless, they will advance the population genetic gain. In relation to that is what they won't do. From genomics, we can't predict individual phenotypes. We can have a better idea of the traits that an individual will be able to pass on to its offspring, but we won't be able to precisely determine what the phenotype is going to be. And then in addition to that, we're not able to account for those non-heritable or non-additive components of traits that get drug along with some of the others that we've been focusing on. And to I guess, expound on this a little more, want to talk about cow longevity for a second. For many, cow longevity is arguably the most important trait that we have for the beef industry. The purebred associations will report this as their stay EPD, and it relates to the likelihood of her staying in the herd to reach a point where she pays for herself. This is a study that was done out of the University of Tennessee back in 2020, where they were looking at differing variable costs and how long it would take for a cow basically to pay for herself. The variable cost may be a little out of line with what we're looking at now, but again, the ratios are probably going to stay similar to where they're at. But from this work, they determined on average, when we look at everything, it took about five calves for a cow to start paying for herself. If she were to miss a calf, that pushes that timeline out to 7 years. And then if she were to miss two calves and you were to let her stay around that long, there's not a very good likelihood that she would ever pay for herself. So any reason for a cow to leave the herd prior to that payoff point just results in you losing money on her. And as important as cow longevity is to the work or to profitability for your herd, the problem is that the heritability of that trait is pretty low. Some say that the 0.1 is being generous. I'm not one to be able to argue that point, but regardless, at 0.1, we can only assume that for a cow's ability to stay in the herd, only 10% is related to her genetic merit, and the other 90% is due to her environment and your management. And this isn't just fertility. There's a lot of separate factors that can go into how long she stays in the herd. Her 4 feet and legs, disposition, conformation, a lot of things that can go into her hitting the truck earlier than what you would want to separate from just fertility. On the genomic end of this, we can do a genomic test and develop this estimated breeding value, but the reliability related to cow longevity is 0.5. And this is on a little bit different scale, where this is saying that only 5% of her ability to stay in the herd can be related back to her genetic test score in that estimated breeding value created from that. That doesn't mean that this information is not important or not useful, but it does stress, at least for a trait such as, and one that is important as longevity, where we still need to be able to utilize those common sense selection criteria that we're using, because again, it's not just one factor. This stay EPD and her longevity is related to a lot of individual factors that don't always play well together in some cases. So how does this work? So all of the genomic testing for these commercial animals comes back to a reference population. So each one of these companies have a variable size reference population of animals where they have complete genomic assays of them, as well as measured phenotypes and performance, pedigree information, basically any piece of data that you would need. That information is coupled with a computer generated algorithm. So you submit your DNA sample, that assay is run on that DNA sample from your individual. Then those DNAs are matched up to what the to the reference population and compared to those, and they use that comparison then to develop these estimated molecular breeding values from that test population. And we'll talk about a couple tests here in just a minute. But the real key that you need to determine and understand is how similar is your herd and the breed composition and genetic makeup of your herd. How similar is it to the reference population that is being used by that testing instrument? Think of this in terms of breed EPDs. We can't compare a Angus sire directly to a Hereford sire using their breed association generated EPDs. We have to have some separate conversion factor. EPDs are meant to compare animals within the same database. So that's the similar philosophy that comes in here. The closer that your herd matches to that reference population used by the genetics company, the better. My mind just went blank. The better accuracy that this will have, and the more confidence is where I was thinking of, the more confidence we can have in the genetic estimates that are made on your animals. Going to highlight a couple tools that are available out there for commercial heifer testing. I do want to say that I'm not promoting or endorsing either any of these options, but would encourage you that if this is something that you may consider useful for your operation, I would encourage you to do your own research, check out their websites, talk with some of their salespeople so that you have an understanding of what their particular tests will do for you and the information that you can hope to get back from them. The first one is Inherit Select. This is Zoetis's product. It is advertised as only for genomic testing of commercial crossbred females. They cannot test bulls, whether straight bred or crossbred bulls. It was developed in cooperation with the University of Georgia, and their reference population consists of about 1.2 million head of cattle. Many of them were cooperators within the Lee Leachman program, as well as some of Zoetis's controlled herds. They provide you with genomically determined EPDs for 19 traits. They use those then to calculate 5 separate economic indexes, just like we see with our breed associations. The reference population, again, the breeds, this is an important component of that. Angus, Red Angus, South Devon, Hereford, Simmental, Gelbvieh, Limousin, and Charolais comprised that. About half of their database was straight bred. The other half was commercial heifers. As you test more animals and have more information going in, they do update their database weekly. And they also, because it's important for the validity of their test, they confirm parentage and breed composition. If by chance the breed composition for your cows is greater than 20% other than the ones listed here, they won't be able to provide you results, especially if you have dairy influence or Bos indicus influence in your cattle. So this is a test that if you do have a large proportion of those other breeds, they won't be able to get you results back for this test. This is an example of the information that you'll get back. Again, they have these genetically estimated expected progeny differences for the 19 traits. And then here at the end, they have the selection indices that they calculate from those. The percentile ranking for the individuals. And I do want to point out these rankings are similar to what we see with percentile rankings from the purebred industry. So if an animal is in the 95th percentile For her, that means that that 95% of the population is equal to or better than what she is. And we also have to understand that depending on the trait, higher ranking may not be where you want to be. So where you fall within that percentile ranking, depending on trait, will be more up to personal preference. The other product that I want to highlight is from Neogen, their Agility Beef program. For this one, a little bit different than Zoetis. And if you try to go on their website, and I did some digging to get ready for this, they don't provide as much information on their reference population beyond the breeds listed. But for their testing, they can test, again, commercial heifers. They can also test steers and commercial bulls within their program. Their reference program is a little different. They have Maine Anjou and Shorthorn instead of the South Devon and Charolais in their makeup. And then their scoring system is a little different than what you would be used to. So I'm going to explain this one just a little bit more than I did with Zoetis, because Zoetis is more in line with what we would expect. But they report their results back on a 1 to 10 scale for 17 different traits and then calculate 3 indices. They have a separate test to measure heterosis instead of breed composition, as Zoetis did, and it is also on that 1 to 10 scale. So these are tables that you can find from Neogen's website that kind of explain their 1 to 10 scoring system. So if we have 2 individuals, heifer A scored an 8, and for heifer pregnancy, that means she's given a score of 9.5%. Where heifer B was given a score of 4, and for heifer pregnancy, that translated to 4.1%. So what you would do is take 9.5 minus 4.1, and that would tell you that you would expect heifer A's daughters to have a 5.4% greater chance of conceiving during a normal breeding season. The one caveat to these charts that they provide, you do need to look at it in relation to each trait to understand what that positive means. As an example for this, if we look under their performance traits at residual feed intake, if heifer A scored an 8 here as well and had a residual intake value of 0.54, and heifer B scored the 4 again and had that means a score of 0.23, we take 5.4 minus 2.3, which equals 0.31, meaning heifer A's daughters would be expected to eat a third of a pound less feed per day for the same level of production as heifer B's daughters. So while that was a mouthful, may have ran through it a little quick, but again, they do a good job of explaining this on their website. But just to show you again, the scoring system is a little different than what we're used to. And this is what their report that you would get back would look like. You have your animal ID, your sample number, your indexes, and then the scoring for each one of their 17 traits. And for both of these companies, they offer some add-on deal packages that you can have some additional testing done, whether it's for genetic abnormalities, hair coat color, a lot of different things that they offer, all for an added price. But they're not the only options out there. You do have some other programs that you can take advantage of. Genetic evaluations, probably the most popular at the moment, is being offered by the American Simmental Association. They allow you to sign up your commercial heifers to be included in their total herd enrollment program. And in reality, what they're doing is they're treating your commercial heifers as if they were purebred Simmental. So The one big issue, not necessarily an issue, the data reporting back to the association is more stringent than what most commercial producers may be used to. Some may fit right in with this. And from all I can tell, it doesn't matter what breed composition they are, that you can enroll them in your program. Then also the American Red Angus Association has their Red Navigator. It is very similar to the GeneMax program that's offered from the American Angus Association in cooperation with Zoetis. For both of these programs, your animals need to be at least 75% either Red Angus or Angus, Black Angus, to be evaluated using those tools. There's the Brangus product that's out there as well from Neogen, and then the two that we just went over a moment ago. And there's going to be continue to be other products brought online depending on your breed of choice that you can be able to take advantage of. And with this, trying to answer the question, does genomic testing work for commercial heifers? This is a study out of the University of Missouri. As with any population genetics study, it results in a graph full of little blobs. But if we take all of those blobs and we put a regression line through there, what they did was they compared the performance of the calf to the dam's GeneMax Advantage score. And we can see throughout these different charts that there is a positively sloped line, again, showing that on average, as the dam's GeneMax score increased, the performance of that calf increased. This one down here at the bottom, that's for back fat, and that's moving in the direction that we would hope that it would go. Again, as her score increased, back fat on average decreased for those offspring. Putting this into practice as we come close to closing out here, the big point is if you choose to implement a genomic testing program, you really need to be testing more heifers than you plan to keep. Otherwise, this is really just an expensive form of confirmation bias. You do need to understand that by testing more heifers than you're going to keep, you need to be able to realize the value from that testing and be able to spread it out over those heifers. But traditionally, like I said, at the end of the day, we can find out whether we made a good or bad decision. But genomics gives us an option where there may be an opportunity to determine if we could have made a better decision in that case. Finally, there's some other programs out there now that's offering some economic incentives to producers. Both Zoetis and Neogen have some marketing programs where animals that are evaluated using their tools, and then as they're followed through the production chain, there can be some incentives returned monetarily to the producers that take advantage of those. You can find that there's some fact sheets out there, as well as information on the company's websites to give you a little bit more information. But there are these feeder calf testing programs that you can get involved with. And then to close out, at the end of the day, the story is that, again, there's a lot of science involved, but genomic testing works. This is a tool that, every cow-calf producer at this point should be taking advantage of when it comes to the young bulls that they're purchasing, to have them with genomically enhanced EPDs to increase, our confidence in what their true genetic merit is and what they're able to pass on to their offspring. We do need to remember that genomics is not going to predict what their phenotype is going to be, and because of that, we still need to be able to utilize some type of common sense selection criteria in combination with the genomic information that we have. And then again, if you choose to use one of these tools for your commercial heifers, you do need to have a good understanding of how your herd relates to that reference population of the tool. And the closer you are to matching it, the more confidence you can have in the results and the accuracy of those results as they are relevant for your system. Finally, here's a couple resources Again, a lot of great fact sheets on beef cattle genetics from E-Extension's eBeef website. There's a lot of good presentations on there. The Beef Repro Task Force, in addition to their reproductive information, there's a lot of great YouTube videos and fact sheets on there, both for reproduction and genetics. And then the Beef Improvement Federation, they're the ones that put out that crossbreed EPD comparison table that you can use if you are trying to make some decisions between breeds of bulls for your commercial operation. And with that, I thank you very much for your time and attention. And if we have time, we can open it up to some questions, I think, Garth.
Yeah, if you have questions, feel free to type those in the Q&A box. There's one there about kind of an old adage, 3 calves to pay for a cow. Not sure that's the case anymore.
I've heard it argued. I remember when I was in college, it was 3, and now anymore you hear it's at least 5 to go that way. So it does, and you do have to look at your own variable costs and what your cost of production are to fine tune and defer and determine that number. But on average, and at least from that work that was done, it was looking at about 5.
Yeah, I've got some stuff here from U.S. Meat Animal Research Center that shows 5 to 6, depending on variable cost. Kind of wrap up here, talk a little bit about heifer development. An area that's certainly been of interest of mine since stepping into this role and having the opportunity to do some stuff as we reconfigured a lot of the research animals here at Ohio State. So we'll talk a little bit about the opportunities and heifer development, kind of what we know. We'll talk a little bit about the importance of getting those females bred and how that really sets the stage for their lifetime production. I use this slide a lot in just about every presentation, and I think it's especially true as we think about heifer development, right? It's a combination of the genetics, some of the stuff John touched on. A big part of this is nutrition and animal health. And it's a way to get these females bred and try to optimize their profit potential throughout their lifetime. Right? A heifer's job is not an easy one. We work in heifer development at the Jackson Agricultural Research Station, somewhere around 100 to 140 heifers a year for our research herd split between the Jackson and Caldwell, the Bell Valley stations, right? Heifer development's costly. I often ask the question, how many producers know what it costs to develop a heifer? I get a variety of answers or no answer. Our folks in the dairy business know this, pretty well. I think there's an opportunity to really hone in on some of the economics of heifer development as those variable costs. Right, we're trying to optimize her reproductive performance. Have a calf every 365 days when she has the first one. Right, trying to optimize economic efficiency and lifetime productivity. Just quick math there on the bottom of the screen, right? 365 days in a year. Gestation's roughly 283. That gives us 82 days. It's going to take her about 45 days postpartum to come into estrus, right? So we got about 37 to ish days to get these females rebred and maintain that calving interval of 365 days. All right, so the longer her life is, as a productive female, the more profitable she's going to be, right? Some of those goals are we want her to calve unassisted by 24 months of age, right? We're going to expect her to breed at just over a year of age. We're going to maintain body condition, rebreed, wean a healthy calf. And John touched on this, longevity versus stayability. Stayability being how long does it take to pay for herself? We'll show you some data here as well, versus longevity. How long does she remain in the herd? How long does she have a productive life as a female in our operation? From a reproductive management standpoint, we can certainly improve reproductive management, right? We need to find and consider systems that are concentrate calving, Probably on a heifer scenario, I think it makes a lot of sense to incorporate AI into some sort of program to improve genetics, right? In theory, heifers are the most genetically advanced females in the herd, right? And then think about, once again, profitability. Heifers are major cost, right? How do we get creative in how we manage these females to increase their value? There's a lot of alternatives with heifers, but when we think about cutting cost in the beef production system, cutting cost in heifer development and hoping they get bred is probably not the best strategy. Right. So if we think about the average cow herd, give or take, roughly 70% of that cow herd is mature cows. Right. 15% of those females are coming with their second calf, and 15% are heifers. Right. When we often think about management, whether that be nutrition, sire selection, those type of things, as we think about management, what group should we focus our efforts on? Right. In a small herd situation, what we often do is focus our efforts on the heifers, right? Especially from a genetic standpoint. We don't want to pull calves, right? Probably no correct answer. But as we think about nutrition and the ability to segregate those different groups, heifers are probably an area we need to focus, right? Average culling rate, some data out of North Dakota State, we're up to about 70%, average cow age 5.7 years old. So if we assume that culling rate in a 20 cow herd, right, 3 calls, I need to retain 3 replacement females. Do we need to keep more females back and develop them than what we actually need? Or do we look at alternative options to add females back to the herd? Think about heifer puberty. Certainly age is a component of this, right? The earlier that heifer's born in the calving season, the earlier she's going to reach puberty. The earlier that we can get her bred in that calving season, the more productive she's going to be, right? And if she's cycled prior to breeding, there's some advantages there from a reproductive standpoint, right? But we need to be as efficient, make sure that these heifers are at a stage where they can cycle prior to the breeding season. So does it matter when our heifers calve? Absolutely, right? Heifers that calve early in their first calving season, they're going to produce more pounds, and it takes about 6 or 7 years to catch up if they are not early calvers in that first breeding season. We know that getting heifers or cows bred as 2-year-olds is one of the greatest challenges in beef production. The earlier she calves in our calving window, the more days she has to recover postpartum to get rebred. So we look at the influence of calving date, and this is data from the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center, over 16,000 heifers. Those heifers that calve in day 1 to 21, right, until they get to past calf 6, right, there's a significant impact on weight. Not so much as we get from day 21 to 22 to 42, but really those females that calve day 43 and after are a detriment, right? Look at that first calf. They do catch up a little bit, but they really never catch up till about calf 7 or 8 in terms of lifetime production. Oklahoma State's got a great tool to look at heifer development cost. Now, certainly you need to know some of the numbers to punch into this, right? But this is using a scenario where they looked at bred heifers at $1,800 a head with a down payment, 9% interest, 5-year loan. You can see all the other information there, right? What do the animals weigh? What's their calf receipts look like? And it was year 6 before this group of heifers on paper generated a profit, right? At year 5, total cash surplus and deficit was $23,000 in the red. So year 7, before that group of heifers generated a profit. Right, we look at the average longevity of that group of heifers from the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center. Heifers that calved their first time from days 1 to 22, on average, lasted 8.2 years. in the cow herd, or 8.2 calving seasons. Day 23 to 42, 7.6, right? And then you lose a full year of productivity once that heifer gets past day 43 of the calving season. Right, so from a benchmarking standpoint, this is all data out of North Dakota's CHAPS system, their cow herd appraisement performance kind of software and database. Right, so looking at the pregnancy rate of first calf heifers for the first 60 to 70 days of the breeding season, right, we really need 70%, 76% of those calves are born by day 21. That's one heat cycle, 87% by day 42, right, and then the remainder by day 63. At weaning, right, if we think about weaning calves, and especially in today's cattle market, 1 day of age difference at weaning can be anywhere from 1.7 to 2.4 pounds. If we back those calves up, 42 days, right, at 1.5 pounds, looking at 30 some pounds, just figure $3 a pound for easy math, $90 a head, that's real money. On the mature cow side of things, from the same database, by day 61, 63% of calves, by day 42, 83% or 87%. So pretty similar, right? There's a 10-year range there between 58 and 64% on that first heat cycle. Right? If we have less than 60% of our mature cows bred in the first 21 days, maybe we need to look at some herd management. I guess from a heifer standpoint, right? If we got the majority of those first calf heifers calving late or in the middle of the calving season, maybe we need to take a good look at our heifer development program. We've already talked about the economics, but think about those late calving cows, right? The data supports that if she's late calving the first time, there's a high probability she's going to be late calving for a while, unless we use some reproductive technology such as synchronization to catch her back up to the herd. And so it takes somewhere between 5 or 6 calves to recover from development cost, production cost of each replacement heifer that we retain. Right? Females that are culled prior to producing those 5 or 6 calves add to that development cost. And that's kind of what we're looking to track here at the university. We develop these females. How many of them actually make it to have 5 or 6 calves? Call cow value to them, but that call cow value doesn't offset the lost production in terms of a calf crop or two. All right, John talked about it. If they don't produce or miss 2 calves for whatever reason, and calling could be that reason, right? She probably never pays for herself. Right. And then another study there from 2011 takes 2 early calving cows to make up for 1 late calving cow. So when we think about heifer development, not everybody makes the cut, right? And how do we make that cut as to what heifers go forward in that system? Certainly age and date of calving within that calving season is potential. And then some of the phenotypic things that John talked about. We think about managing nutrition in these females. Remember this hierarchy of nutrient use, right? They got to maintain themselves first. Then we're talking growth and development. We get that female bred, right? And that first calf during lactation, right, we still have growth and development ongoing. Right? So that nutrient requirement, are going to differ between developing heifers and maintaining cows, right? We want that heifer. A lot of the studies out there show between 55 and 65% of her mature body weight at the first breeding. By the time she calves 283 days later, she needs to be around 85% of her mature body weight. And then when we come with that second calf, hopefully that growth and development phase has passed. A couple of different fact sheets out there. About every university's got one on nutrition for developing heifers, based on estimated mature weight, what that target weight is, pounds of TDN, crude protein, and so forth. Body condition, probably can't be overstated. That heifer's body condition at the time she calves the first time might be the most important time we utilize body condition scoring throughout her lifetime. Right, she needs to be in good shape when she calves prior to calving the first time. Right, think about lactation, what that's going to do to body condition. If she's in poor body condition prior to first calving, lactation is going to be hard on her. We're going to delay the return to estrus post calving, and then increase the percent chance that she's a late calver going forward. So what have we done in terms of heifer development? What we've tried to look at. So we got some data kind of finalized from 2022. I'll explain why we're looking at 2022 data and not anything more recent. But we started with 139 weaned heifers. The average weaning weight, 457 pounds. There's about 190 pounds of weaning weight variation at the time that we weaned those animals and sent them to the Jackson station. The average value per head in 2021 was $463, right? In 2025 math, if you just take $3 a pound, these heifers today are worth $283, somewhere in that range, looking at bluegrass stockyards, $1,371 a head, right? So that's a significant cost up front, and probably one of the driving factors why we're really not expanding this cow herd any. These heifers are super valuable as feeder calves, and with the cost of money, not a whole lot of incentive there to maintain a bunch of heifers. We turned those heifers out on pasture for about 45 days. We weighed them and assigned them to 3 groups, right? So what we did that year, we actually took the lighter weight females, fed them 1.5% of their body weight, kind of that middle group 1%, and then the heaviest females, kind of a low 0.5% of their body weight in terms of grain. Had free choice hay and mineral. We figured labor and equipment cost around 30 cents a head per day. So during this kind of 85-day background period, you can see the total pounds gained, the cost of feed per head, so that variable cost, right? Certainly the more feed we fed, the higher that was, anywhere from $40 to $92. The hay per head, of course, hay was a lot cheaper then than it is now. You can see the cost of gain per head per day. The high group, $1.86 per head per day. The low group, about $1.28. And the middle group was there in the middle. Mm-hmm. Average daily gain, we weighed them every 30 days and kind of looked at that average weight. What we were able to do is take a group of heifers that had 190 pounds variance prior at weaning, rather, and narrowed that variance down to about 23 pounds at the time that we took them off of this trial. At the time that we bred them, it was about the same, about 30 pounds of variance. The end of March, we put the low group out to grass. And then we had this question, if we take these heifers that have been fed for the last 85, 90 days and kick them out the grass, are we going to crash them, right? Are we going to be in a negative state of nutrition? So we took about half of them, half of those groups of roughly 35, 40 heifers in the high and middle groups and put them out to grass. So we ended up breeding 133 out of 139. We used Angus, Red Angus, Simmental sires. These heifers were also in a reproductive trial, looking at timed AI at 60 versus 72 hours on a 6-day cedar program. And the preg check data, final preg check to the AI, that high grain group actually did really well, right? And we didn't have enough replication, to say that this is statistically significant one way or the other, but just kind of doing some farm demonstration type things, right? So we ended up with about 15 to 18 heifers in each one of these groups. They did pretty well on a fixed time AI protocol, regardless of how much feed we fed. You'd be pretty happy with that, 55 to 90%. It was interesting that the middle group was the lowest for whatever reason. But then we looked at those heifers we kicked out on grass and kind of a subset. And we had that farm manager was really worried about crashing those females. And it does appear that, a subset of those heifers, for whatever reason, may have crashed. Just looking at pregnancy rates at the time to AI, but the rest of them were very comparable. Very pleased with kind of how that year turned out. What we probably did, we underfed the heavy weaning weight females, right? We didn't give them enough grain to perform probably to what their genetic potential would have allowed them in terms of gain. They probably, if we'd have fed them in our normal protocol, would have been quite a bit heavier. Based on 1 year's of data, like I said, really no statistics to it, but it appears cost effective to feed those light weaning weight females. Right, we narrowed the spread, and they were actually the heavy or the largest percent, greatest percent preg check to the AI date. Right, we increased the value of any open heifers by adding weight. In this cattle market today, I think there's value there. Right, start with more heifers than you need. They don't get bred to a timed AI or whatever your AI protocol is. There's still tremendous value there as a yearling heifer. They were then kicked out with a bull for 55 days. 23 of them, or 29 of them rather, were bred to the bull. We had 13 opened at the end of our 56-day breeding season, rather. So we look to repeat this. We've had some trouble doing that, right? 2022, we actually just fed 2 groups, a high and a low, kind of got rid of that middle bunch, and there were no differences. Numeric differences as we think about conception rate to that timed AI. In 2023, we had no data. We had some nutritional trouble at the research station that really set that group of heifers back for throughout their lifetime. And the heifers that were born in 2024, they'll be bred here in about 35, 40 days. And we think about reproductive classes in any group of females, right? Certainly heifers. We have heifers that have cycled, heifers that have not cycled. And probably what we ought to go do in retrospect is look at the weights of those females at breeding, and then go back and weigh them as mature cows and see what percent of mature body weight they were when we bred them. But heifers that are not cycling, there are some programs that we can do in order to get them to cycle. All right, think about anestrus and yearling heifers. This was kind of a research summary, 700 some heifers at 5 locations, right? At 14, 15 months of age, it varied tremendously, right? And I think John talked about how environment plays a big role into anything we do maintaining these heifers. Well, that range of anestrus was anywhere between 6 and 81%. Of those yearling heifers, right? Postpartum cows varied a little more. All right, we've kind of already seen this in a little bit different form, but that calving period and herd survival, if they calve in that first 20, 21, 22 days, that first heat cycle, they do remain in the herd longer in terms of calving seasons. All right, heifer performance, it cut off this particular research study, but looked at calving period as first 23 days, right? Calving weaning weight certainly higher. The first heat cycle, hot carcass weight was actually heavier, right? That animal's older. If they're all harvested at the same time, increased marbling score. Why that's not an increase in quality grade, it's an increase in marbling score. The percentage of those cattle that grade choice are better, and the carcass value going back to $13 was greater for those calves born earlier. Right. So in summary, as we think about heifers, we want them to reach puberty, somewhere 12, 13 months of age. John talked about genetics, the heritability of age at puberty is moderately variable or heritable. About 0.33. Certainly nutrition, environment play a role in that. If we can get them to cycle prior to breeding, that conception rate, the third estrus is about 20% higher than conception at the first time they cycle. Right? We ask them to conceive by around 15 months of age. ideally, once again, in that first 21 days of the breeding season, calve by 2 years of age. Right? Hopefully they have minimal need for assistance in calving. And then get them to rebreed as a 2-year-old cow at 85 to 90% of their mature body weight. Body condition score somewhere 5.5, 6 when they calve that first time. All right. So how do we solve, that heifer problem, so to speak? Do we purchase replacement females? And more recently, I've heard that conversation being, do I have to purchase heifers? Right? Can I purchase bred cows in a commercial setting versus buying open cows or, certainly breds? What's the value of genetics there? Approaches that don't require a heifer bull, right? Can we utilize AI to add value to those females? From a breeding heifer standpoint, right? We work with a lot of small herds, right? The average cow herd in Ohio is about 17 cows. So we think about that 20 cow type of example, right? If I'm maintaining heifers, can I afford to buy a low birth weight bull? How many heifers do I need to breed? On the flip side, can we afford not to buy a low birth weight bull? A live calf certainly worth more than a not live calf. What happens when we breed mature cows to a heifer bull? The lower birth weight tends to result in less weaning weight. These are some old figures, right? But you take 50 pounds a head on 15 head, 750 pound calves today at over $2. We start giving up some pounds a lot of times when we have those low birth weight calves out of mature cows. Kind of a program that we've talked a little bit about in AI school, kind of comes out of Missouri, looking at a 45-day natural service versus timed AI, where they had 50% pregnancy timed AI. AI's program cost $60 a head. Cost per pregnant heifer was pretty similar, but the value of those AI versus natural service heifers, $210 a head total. We had older calves at weaning. Females rebred quicker, right? So we had added pounds the second year, greater growth because of the genetics, right? If you think about the programs here in Ohio where we sell heifers, for the last 3-4 years, I've managed that Ohio replacement female sale. I think this pans out to be relatively true, right? The bred heifers that are bred to known genetics, not necessarily a yearling herd bull or something like that, and are bred earlier on for a calving season that suits most folks in this state, often early to mid-March, tend to sell higher than those females that are bred later or bred to potentially the herd bull. They also use the cleanup bull for 53 days to compare the economics here. 136 heifers, once again, around 51% of them fixed timed AI, 37% natural service, had some open cattle as well. Right. In this instance, that heifer that was bred fixed timed AI was worth $311 more than the heifer bred to the cleanup bull, and it cost $141 a head pregnancy to utilize that cleanup bull. All right. So some scenarios that we've worked through. If we need a new herd bull, right, we narrow our purchasing decisions down in that catalog, to that low birth weight bull or a bull that's a little bit more moderate in terms of birth weight. All right, do we purchase that yearling heifer bull from a local seed stock producer to pull calves? All right, we know we're going to give up some pounds at weaning. All right, kind of the advantages here. That bull should be easier calving. Would expect her to have higher calving ease, but we're going to give it some pounds. Right, those heifer bulls, and we see it every spring, do cost a little more out of those sale catalogs, and we probably give up some potential from mature cows. The flip side here, right, we buy the other bull and utilize artificial insemination to make heifers. We're going to synchronize those heifers. We're going to keep more heifers, breed more heifers than we really need. We're going to reduce that lost performance. Certainly, we need to have facilities in order to get this done. But like I said, in today's market, there's some value to these yearling open type heifers to enter the beef supply. If we're going to buy heifers, we need to do our homework. You know, there's different scenarios we can look at. From a bull purchasing standpoint. Do we buy a high dollar bull with great numbers? How proven is he? Do we roll those dice in terms of accuracy? Does he have those genomic enhanced EPDs that John talked about? Kind of the last scenario is we're just going to AI all the heifers to a proven sire, and maybe use a cleanup bull, right? Should we retain or raise or buy heifers? This is something Stan and I have talked about for several years, right? What are the value of those heifers as feeder calves at weaning? What does it cost to develop those females? What does it cost me to go out and buy a bred heifer that's bred 3 to 6 months? Certainly out of the replacement female sale last year there in Zanesville, that market was quite a bit better than it was even in 2023. But if I'm only going to maintain a small number of heifers, I think we could still make the case that even given upwards of $3,000 a head can be economical. The last time I run the heifer development budget tool out of the University of Missouri, right, it cost $1,958 to develop that female, right? And that's before we breed her. Think about considerations if we do decide to buy females. What is the interest rate? Interest rates on borrowed capital. Can I use that capital for something else? What are our cash flow needs, right? Should I retain those animals? Should I market them as feeder calves? Cost to feed. We're pretty fortunate right now. Corn price relatively low, but hay price historically high just due to supply and demand, labor, right? What's the relative price between cull cows and heifer calves? Cull cows pretty valuable commodity right now as well. What are our culling rates? Are we north of that 17% for whatever reason? Are we less than that? How many heifers do we truly need? Do we have any sort of environment restrictions that are going to prohibit those retained females from growing? We really need to maintain those heifer calves separate from mature cows and 2-year-olds from a nutritional standpoint. Are the genetics that we want available, right? And can those retained females thrive in our environment, right? If you're not good at developing heifers, maybe buying them is a better option. Some folks are a lot better at it than others, a lot more efficient, a lot more cost effective. And a lot of that has to do, with feed availability and the total number of animals that need to be maintained. Are bred females available? That is the other piece. This spring, bred females, young cow-calf pairs out in the western states, been pretty valuable. Just to wrap up on a couple things, as we think about reminders going into the summer, early pregnancy detection, and I think maybe Stan talked about this a little bit as it relates to cull cows last month. Never been cheaper, right? Given the value of these cull cows, whether that's having the vet out to palpate, ultrasound, doing a blood test, those type of things. That blood test, we've been teaching how to collect blood at AI schools for several years. It's pretty simple, pretty cost effective, very accurate in identifying open females. We may get some false positives, as with any early pregnancy detection, as we have embryonic loss there in early gestation. All right, so we think about our ultimate goal as we go into the breeding season. Hopefully everybody's had a decent calving season this spring. What is that ultimate challenge, right? It's maintaining that 365-day calving interval. We're going to have 280, 283 days of gestation. We're not going to change that much. 35 to 40 days for that animal return to estrus and 45 days to get her pregnant, right? As we think about turning bulls out and getting heifers bred or using AI, can't reiterate enough. If we can get that female bred in the first heat cycle, the value that's going to add to our operation over time. Just to finish with this, it's a quote from Dr. Griffith, University of Tennessee, right? Long and short of it is, if we try to do things like we did last year, we're probably doing it wrong. Unless we did them wrong last year, and that could be the case. I spent a lot of time at a meeting this morning talking about weather and feed supplies and those type of things. We hope we don't have a drought in 2025. 2024, we had to call a bunch of audibles, due to weather, but we can't rule that out. Some guy said this morning, it's farming. It's different every day, and we have to manage accordingly. Any questions?
Garth, you got one in the Q&A.
How hard should heifers be pushed with good feed after weaning, and then after breeding to increase size of breeding calving? Old word was if too fat, milking ability reduced in count. Yeah. So size and body condition are really two different things. And size is going to be percentage of mature size is going to have a lot to do with the cow herd that you're operating in versus body condition. We can influence that with feed pretty quick. Prior to breeding, we body conditioned a bunch of heifers down at the research station. What's that been, 3 weeks ago now? Most of them were 6s. And that's a month prior to calving, or prior to breeding rather. Heifers prior to calving, right? Because lactation is going to pull her down. She's still growing. She's still developing, at least a 6 prior to calving for heifers would be ideal. There's a lot of folks that are comfortable closer to a 7, but there's a cost there from a feed standpoint. Anybody got an idea what it cost them to develop heifers? Stan probably knows his down to a penny.
Well, the cost starts with the value of the heifer, and she's pretty valuable right now. And I think John made some good points. If we can eliminate the worst ones with some DNA testing or something, and go ahead and put them in the feedlot, market them for something like that before we spend any money at all on those ones that simply don't have the genetic ability that we've identified with the technology that we've got available today. There's certainly a lot to be said for that. The cost of heifer development starts with that. You pick the number, $1,500 plus or minus calf.